I think you might realistically look at Janai as an SEC Player of the Year type of guy. And that's remarkable when in November and in a large part of December, you watch Janai's game, and it was primarily defense and rebounding. It was shot blocking. It was one-on-one defensive matchups, altering shots, grabbing defensive rebounds. He's becoming much more confident. He's increased 100% his confidence on the offensive end, and as a result, they're running the offense through him. Now, the number of post touches that Auburn has gotten in SEC play has been a direct result of his productivity, of his assertiveness, his confidence, his attitude on the offensive side of the ball. That just continues to feed the more success he has offensively.
Yeah, for sure. To the coaching staff and to Bruce Pearl and what he's had to go through, it really feels like it's the same job. He has the same title as the head coach of the Auburn basketball team, but it feels like completely different ways of going about his job from a day-to-day perspective, from last year when you have 2 first-round NBA draft picks to this year. Mm-hmm. How much of his just basically kind of Midas touch do you put, or is this basically all team-led and he's taking a backseat? Like, where do you put his emphasis on what this year's team has been able to do, especially over the last 5 games?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So I think it's a really savvy question. Bruce Pearl is known as the rah-rah guy. He's known as the recruiter, the program builder, Mr. Excitement, Mr. Promotion and Marketing, and that's BP. Well, those things are true. Those are Bruce Pearl. But nobody watches more film than the head basketball coach of the Auburn Tigers. Nobody's more of a basketball junkie. And nobody, I think, is undersold as much on his X's and O's ability and coaching, actual on-floor coaching ability as Bruce Pearl. Nobody is, I think, as underappreciated for that aspect as he is, because he's so good at all the other elements, too. But last night they instituted a little wedge cut, a little wedge screen on the inside for Janai Broome and Jalen Williams that led to some early baskets in the second half. This team has adapted what it's done. Its identity has shifted to more of a post-led identity. Well, a few years ago when you had the top 3-point shooter in the history of the SEC in Bryce Brown, and you had the veteran point guard in Gerhard Harper, it was more of a perimeter-oriented team. Last year, you had Jabari Smith could play inside out, Walker Kessler with the national leader in blocked shots. They became a little more inside out. I think he does a wonderful job of adapting his teams to where there's the most talent, where you win the individual one-on-one matchups. And if the post players are going to win more one-on-one matchups than the guards, he's going to feed those inside guys. And if they're going to be a little stronger defensively by working in some zone, that's what they're going to do. I think he is a tremendous X's and O's coach, and I think you're seeing that this year in the way this team has evolved from November to where we are now.
We're talking with Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network. Next up for Auburn is Mississippi State Saturday, next Wednesday at LSU. But you got Mississippi State at home, and then LSU, 2 teams who've just so far won 1 game apiece in the conference. These are important, though, because later on in the year, you got 2 with Alabama, you got 2 with Tennessee, you got Georgia again. So I know Auburn's really looking to get these wins here in this the first half of the SEC schedule.
And particularly with the LSU game, you never take road wins for granted. It doesn't matter what the opponent's record is. The floor of this league is so much higher than it was a decade ago, right? The ceiling is higher, certainly, but even the floor is higher than it was a season ago. Teams 13 and 14 in the league are capable on their home floor of going out and beating just about anybody. So you got to be consistent. You got to continue to see. We've seen now a couple of games in a row with Wendell Green Jr. and Alan Flanagan having fantastic games. You need to see that consistently now. 2 games is great. You'd like to see it 5 or 6 or 7 games, or heck, let's just do it throughout the month of March too, and that'll be just fine. And Auburn will be competing with those teams like Alabama and Tennessee for the top of that SEC. So every one of these games is important to continue the momentum, to continue to build confidence, to continue to stack up as many wins as you can here in this SEC schedule.
Yeah, for sure. As you kind of expand it a little bit wider, obviously Tennessee and Alabama right now seem to be the top of the SEC. How do you think Auburn stacks up with the top of the league? I know we're only 3-4 games in for most teams, but Tennessee, Alabama, A&M, Auburn, Missouri, Florida, all the teams that are kind of in the upper crust right now. How do you think Auburn runs with these teams, even though they haven't played them on the floor yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I think you want to see the consistency from Auburn's guards the way that we've seen it this last week. I'd like to see that consistency for another couple of weeks before I put them at the top. I think they have a shot at being at the top when all is said and done if their guards play as well as they've played these last two games. I love Tennessee's veteran presence. I mean, they're an older team, they're a savvy team, and they sort of have that edge to them early on in league play where they'll just come out and score 16 straight points to open a game, or in Ole Miss's case, when Ole Miss playing at home against them shot well early, they turned up the wick defensively, shut them down, things got going. When they start making shots, they're really tough. Alabama makes more threes than anybody else in the league. They're up and down. They turn the ball over, but it doesn't matter because they get so many extra possessions. You got to value the basketball against them. But, when Alan Flanagan is locked in and Wendell Green Jr. is locked in, and when Janai Broome, I like Janai in a one-on-one matchup against anybody in the league. I think he's got that good of body control, good nose for the basketball. We talk about football players having a nose for the football. I just think Janai similarly is a savvy guy, knows how to finish, knows how to get offensive rebounds, knows how to defend. So I like him in a one-on-one matchup against anybody. And if the guards are locked in too, they can play with anybody in the league.
He is Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network. And Brad, as always, we appreciate you coming on with us. Thank you for all the many times you've taken time to join us here on this show. Much appreciated you joining us.
It has been a pleasure today and every time, and I am a fan of you two gentlemen personally, professionally. Cannot wait to see what is next, and we'll be right there behind you and beside you, no matter what is next. Really appreciate the time and the conversation as always.
Thanks so much, Brad.
Thanks for the kind words, Brad.
We'll talk to you soon. Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network, as Auburn riding the 2-game conference win streak going into Mississippi State. He mentioned, though, they go on the road to LSU, which even if LSU's only won one conference game, I mean, that is a tough place to play.
It's always tough. And I think yesterday, and I think a lot of coaches will do this, yesterday with Kentucky in Rupp Arena, I think a lot of those guys will say, hey, look, this is what South Carolina did at Kentucky. And Kentucky was picked here and point to the very top of the SEC. You can't take anything for granted, especially on the road, and especially Auburn, because one of the last times they were on the road, they lost to Georgia. I mean, if Coach Bruce Pearl could just say, hey, look, it wasn't that long ago we lost as the favorite on the road, so we can't, go out here just thinking that, since we won a couple of interesting games, we're too good than how we actually are.
Right. So appreciate Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network joining us really since the beginning. He's been a very consistent guest as well here on this show, as we're in our final week. So we want to pay tribute to some of these guests we've had as well, because we've had some really cool ones on. Chris Marler with the College Football Uncensored podcast will join us coming up at 3:00, and much more to get to as we roll on this Wednesday afternoon. More next.
Talking to your kids about the
Fox Sports 102.9 WKXX Live. Chase and Gerhard with you on this Wednesday afternoon. So Jacksonville State is, if you've been to games, noticed uniforms, maybe watched games, you've been seeing more of the uniforms and some of the branding say Jack State. Usually you see JSU or Jacksonville State.
Yep.
But the University Board of Trustees have voted last night, and Jack State is going to be now what the university is known as. I know a lot of folks, and probably still will, JSU has always been the logo.
Right.
It's always been what people referred to it as. But as other universities across the Southeast, Jackson State, also known as JSU, you got Jacksonville University down in Florida. So I think this is a really good move for them to kind of separate themselves. And so Jack State, JAX State, is going to be kind of the new moniker for the Gamecocks.
I think it really works. Everybody right now, and this goes beyond athletics. Everybody right now is really hypersensitive about branding and about sending out the right message. And when you have a university which is as popular in a town which is as popular as Jacksonville, you can run into a lot of teams and areas that have the exact same name. So you have the Jacksonville Dolphins, you had Jackson State University, JSU was one, Jacksonville was the other. I do believe this does create a good measure of difference and of separation between those two. It's unique branding. You don't see the X a lot in a lot of school names, and to have that in there, I think will create some separation at a really good time when they're making the jump to the SCS.
Oh, for
FBS.
sure. Let's jump to the phones. Jeremy on with us. How are you, Jeremy?
I'm good, guys. I'm good. I like it. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's going to, imagine the student section throwing up the X up in the stands during the game, during field goals or during fourth down conversions or something like.
I like it.
You can tie all kinds of stuff into it.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
I never thought
like
about that either. But like the Des Bryant X when he used to put it up in the area, I like that. I like that works.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it's there's a lot of options, a lot of things that you can do with this. Although they like using television programs that are popular, you've got that the NBC show that pops the X up when they don't want, something good. You could throw something like that up on the screen. I mean, there's so much stuff that you can do with this.
100%.
It's a great idea. It just shows moving up Conference USA, wanting to do something to move yourself in a different direction and be something different. And I like it. I think it'll be good.
I'm right there with you. I think it's going to be great. And also you're doing it, like you said, on the heels of that jump to the next conference. And so it's not like you're already there and then now you're trying this weird thing to kind of rebrand. And this is, I'm not, bashing Troy at all. But when Troy went from Troy State to Troy, it just kind of felt like a weird, awkward transition. It's now Troy and everybody knows them and loves them. But I think JSU is doing this at a really good time.
I wanted to bring something up that we have talked about in the past. And I can't remember if me and Chase talked about it or if we talked about it after you came onto the show, Gerhard.
Mm-hmm.
And because we've talked about a lot. It all starts merging together.
Yeah.
But we talked about Kellen Moore and how great of a head coach he could be.
Yeah.
And I saw today that he has now been granted the opportunity to interview with the Carolina Panthers. I think that's a great fit for him.
Yeah.
I think he's a young coach. If you're going to be anywhere, that's a great spot. I mean, you're in a division that's winnable because Brady's not going to be in Tampa next year. They're going to fall apart when they lose Brady. I mean, they're not going to be able to keep it together down there. And so the Falcons, who knows what they're going to be next year? They've been a complete mess And then you have Carolina. You have the Saints. You know, the Saints haven't figured it out either. I think that Carolina, you put a great young coach in there, and I'll tell you somebody else that just off the top of it, this could be a Cliff Kingsbury type team.
Yeah,
I think he would do okay at Carolina also, but I'd rather see it go to Kellen Moore, and I'd like to see him get a shot.
Yeah. I think he's done a great job. I'm right there with you.
Well, what I'd really love to see is him in the same division as a football team coached by D'Amico Ryan.
Oh, yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah.
That would be an incredible – I mean, because I feel like those are your two next up-and-coming coaches.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to be the two that we're talking about years ago. I mean, you know, I hate to say this about Ryan's, but he's going to be a Rooney Rule interview for a lot of teams, and he shouldn't be. He should legitimately be considered a prospect as head coach because he is incredible. He has got a great mind. He learns from the best.
Right.
I mean, not, you know, in his playing days, he didn't just play. He took something from the coach. And those are the guys that come out of the league and go back into the league as coaches and go into college as head coaches or assistants. Those are the guys that, to me, do the best.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And at the same time, you with Kellen Moore and with D'Amico, I think both of them, they're going to be the exact same thing in the sense that, like, they are guys that played at high-level colleges. D'Amico's NFL career was a little bit longer than Kellen's NFL career, but they'll both come in as these fresh-minded guys on either side of the football, and one's on offense, one's on defense, but they both, since they're young, they both know how to relate to this new age kind of player and some of the things that they have to go through. And I think the further we get into these guys that have NLI and whatnot, it's going to require a different kind of coach. And some of the old school coaches will be able to do it, but I think some of these guys that are just outside of that realm will be able to handle it a lot more.
Well, and I think this Rams position opening up, that would be a great spot for Ryan's. That would be a great spot for him because I think that the Rams are going to. Yeah, they don't have any draft picks. Yes, they've blown a lot, you know, into building and to get that Super Bowl. It cost them a lot, but there's ways around that, and there's ways that they can rebuild that team and get back. They may have a rebuilding year, but they could rebuild it back and get some draft pick back. That, you know, find a way to make a trade with the Chicago Bears and get that number 1 pick.
Yeah,
just call them up and say, hey, what do we have that you want, that you need, and we'll give it to you for that number 1 pick.
And you know the Bears will be looking too because they think they found their quarterback. They think they have their quarterback in Justin Fields, and it's like, hey, if we can get some complementary pieces and then get one of these teams that need a quarterback, if you want CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, you have to go up, you have to come up and give us a king's ransom. And so the Bears are sitting in a really good position right now to be able to pick up some more draft picks, and these quarterback hungry teams are in a position to where they can give up maybe a defensive player and a couple of picks in order to solidify their team.
Well, and now here's a good NFL note. If the AFC Championship game has to be played on a neutral field, Atlanta is the leading candidate. So,
nice.
How great is that we could have an AFC Championship game that close?
That would be awesome.
Knowing there is a football team in Atlanta, and we're talking about how there's a better chance to get a championship game in the NFL there by having a neutral site game than the Falcons. I mean, that just is. That's where we're at.
Do you think that whatever team was going to be petitioning to get the visitors' locker room, because we don't want that Atlanta Falcons curse.
Do not want don't put that voodoo on me, Ricky Bobby.
Exactly.
Jeremy, we got to jump to a break. We got Chris Marler coming up, joining us on the other side. But appreciate your call today.
Hey, thank you guys. Y'all have a good one and go Braves.
Go Braves.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
We'll take more phone calls coming up in hour 2. But Chris Marler from the College Football Uncensored podcast joins us next.
The Press Box, where the big For WKXX Live, these guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
Hour number 2 on a Wednesday afternoon. So glad you're joining us. Chase Robinson, Gerhard Mathangani. We are here ready to go for another hour. And to start hour 2, we are glad to welcome on our friend Chris Marlar, College Football Uncensored podcast, as well as Saturday Down South. Chris, always great to talk with you. How are you today?
I'm good, man. I'm trying to just pretend that the season isn't over. Just like, I'm trying to drum up as much content and deep dive into stats that I can for no reason, other than I just don't want the season to be over. So
I know we have a long way to go till college football again, but you were in Southern California for the national championship. Before we get into the game, I got to know your thoughts on SoFi Stadium. Such a interesting, honestly, to me, it looks like a spaceship, but you were there in the stadium. What is SoFi Stadium like?
So I live in Atlanta, and I am a pretty big homer when it comes to just how great Mercedes-Benz is. Pretty new. It's a great stadium. It also looks like a giant spaceship or transformer. SoFi is like on another level, man. It is. The entire setup is really cool. It doesn't feel like there's a bad seat in the house. They will not let you go hungry or thirsty or anything like that. Super convenient, like just in terms of like getting to your seats. Not as convenient if you're trying to sneak down to a lower level. I may have learned, but no, it was a great stadium. It was really cool. It had a blast, honestly. Had a blast. The weather was awful, which I just did not expect in LA. But yeah, it was a really, really cool setup.
One of the big things, obviously, going into the game was just how good Georgia was, and all the talk going into it was about if TCU could find that magic one more time. Just big picture, just the way that it all laid out when you were watching the game, when you were watching that first half unfold. Were even you surprised about just how good and how different those two talent levels were, or did you kind of see it coming, and obviously nobody saw 65-7 coming, but just saw what transpired to be kind of what the game played out in your head beforehand?
Yeah, so like you said, nobody saw 65-7 happening. I mean, that is, if you said you did, you're lying. But I will say that, like, I watched this Georgia team all year, and over the last 2 seasons, really, and you kind of see what Kirby's built, and like for the longest time, it was he was so close and so close. It seems like at times this year, I saw it against Tennessee, I saw it against Oregon. People even now on Twitter still want to bring up the Missouri and Kent State games for whatever reason. Georgia just seemed like a team that, like, if they wanted to, they could do whatever they wanted to whoever was across from them, like at any point. Like if they wanted to prove a point, they absolutely could, and they absolutely would. You saw it against Tennessee, especially. Coming into that game where they were like the number one offense, number one team in the country. Hendon Hooker's a Heisman favorite. They just beaten Alabama and put up like 1,000 points on Nick Saban's defense. Kirby's he's got them at a different level. Now I will say with TCU, it was a great story, right? Like nobody was, I think, pulling against TCU unless you were like strictly a UGA fan. And I did think that it was going to be pretty lopsided because I just didn't see what TCU would be able to bring, that Georgia wouldn't be able to handle. I think the only thing I saw before the game that was in TCU's favor, like statistically, was the turnover margin. And they were +9 on the season. Georgia was like -1. And, lo and behold, Georgia gets 3 turnovers and TCU gets none. I thought that it might be a little bit better, especially with the Heisman, finalists at quarterback. But yeah, man, they were out of their league, and I hate to say it, but they were absolutely out of their league and outmatched.
We're talking with Chris Marlar, College Football Uncensored podcast. Chris, when it comes to Stetson Bennett, just what he's done over the last 2 years, people counting him out, him proving them wrong. Would you say he is the best quarterback in Georgia football history, like some folks are saying following Monday night?
First off, do you know he's a walk-on?
Yeah.
I had no clue. I had not heard that storyline once. I've been a huge fan of Stetson Bennett for the last 2 seasons, to be honest, and partially just because, living in the state, somebody had to pull for him because his own fan base didn't for over a year and a half. It seemed like. I love the story. I think it's awesome. I don't understand how you really don't how you could dislike him. I know the Eric Ainge thing, and a couple other people had some comments about how he's 25 and that somehow gives him an advantage. I don't think that when I was 25, especially if I was that tall and that skinny and built like Screech from Saved by the Bell, I don't think that necessarily would have given me a leg up just because I was older. But I will say he's probably, not from a talent standpoint, but he is the most accomplished and best quarterback in Georgia football history, and it's really not close. I mean, there's not, that's not to say anything negative about Aaron Murray or Stafford or David Green, but no one else even came close to achieving what that kid did. And so, yeah, like I said, it's a cool story. I'm glad he's out of eligibility only because I don't want to hear Georgia fans at the start of this offseason do what they did last year, which was, yeah, sure, he won us a national championship, but he needs to transfer out and just right off in the sunset and do the right thing. Just mind blowing, just takes on that kid for his whole career.
One of the things I'm going to ask you, actually, man, piggyback so well. I was going to ask you this even before you brought up that very last point, which I think is a really good one. The fact that it is kind of great that he is leaving. I think a lot of people right now are looking at Georgia's schedule in 2023 and saying, "Oh, we'll pencil this team back in for another national championship." And I think Carson Beck's going to be. I think Beck's going to be good as quarterback, and they've got a lot of talent back. Are you one of these guys that is just penciling in Georgia as a contender next year, back in the Final Four, or are you looking elsewhere in the landscape of college football as you look ahead?
Man, honestly, I hate to be the prisoner of the moment, and this is my least favorite thing in all of sports.
I apologize, Chris. I apologize.
No, it's not your fault. It's ESPN's fault. It's it's the moment somebody wins a national championship or a Super Bowl, whatever. It's the next thing is can they repeat next year? And here are the odds. It's and those odds are so ridiculous. I think I heard Feinbaum bring it the other day, somehow against Saban that he had the best odds of any team since USC. That Vegas makes those odds. Anyway, that being said, you've seen Georgia's schedule, right?
Yeah.
It's not great.
No, it's not.
It's great for them, but it is I said going into this season that they would go undefeated, and I thought I wasn't really big on the revenge tour for Bama, and I thought they would beat Bama. And I thought, honestly, they would get to the regular season without any game being within 10 points, just because of how easy that schedule was. Especially with how good Georgia is. It gets only easier next year because they play, I believe it is 11 of their 12 teams that they are on that schedule had 5 or more losses this year. You miss out on having to play Oklahoma. And regardless of what some Kentucky and Tennessee fans think, the SEC East is a very fortunate schedule to have, as opposed to the SEC West. So I think it'll be a cakewalk for them. Will they get to the playoff? I mean, maybe Bama, LSU has something to say about it, but I don't see anybody in that division coming close to them next year.
When you look at this 2022 Georgia team, and we talked about this on our show yesterday, in my eyes, 2019 LSU, 2020 Bama, two of the best teams I've ever seen. Would you stack up this 2022 Georgia team around those that 2019 LSU and 20 Bama?
Honestly, I really would. And it sounds crazy to say because 2019 LSU was probably the best season I think any of us ever watched. It was hard to dislike that team and the personality they had on there with Joe Burrow and everything. And that grizzly bear that turned human being and Coach O. But the 2020 Bama thing, it's so interesting because it's I put this out there today on my Twitter and just kind of comparing them side by side of what it looks like from just a dominant standpoint, how dominant they were this season, especially against ranked teams. because I really do feel like, for whatever reason, I've seen this several times today where people think that last year's Georgia team was somehow more dominant than this year's, and it's not even close. It's not even. I don't even know how that's up for debate. They played 7 ranked teams this year. They put up over 40 points in 6 of the 7 games. Their average point or margin of victory in those games against ranked opponents was 29.4. And to put that in, to put that into some sort of comparison, I guess, to like the 2020 Bama. 2020 Bama was around 19.3 average scoring margin against ranked teams. 2019 LSU was only 15. And you look at, Clemson from the year before that in 2018. When you stack it up against the most dominant teams and seasons of all time, they're right up there. And to be honest, from a statistical standpoint, they're ahead. Like, they are above those teams. Do I think they beat 2019 LSU or 2020 Bama on a neutral side or whatever? Probably not. But they put together a really, really dominant year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I'm in agreement with a lot of that. And okay, so this next question, it kind of goes back to what you said at the very top of this interview, where I'm like you. I'm like, I want college football to continue. But as you look back at this season, new coaches at blue blood programs like LSU and like USC and Oklahoma, Georgia winning the national championship, despite the final game of the college football season, do you think, and I'm asking kind of a leading question here, because I think this is one of the more fun college football seasons I've had, just watching it from across the college football landscape. How do you put this college football season in a bow? How will you think you'll remember it as you move forward from here on out?
I think there's no other way to start looking back at this season than by congratulating the University of Tennessee for being ranked number 1 for 4 days, because they made commemorative books about it. They were back. And I'll just say this: listen, I respect the program. I love Hendon Hooker, and I've got plenty of friends that are Tennessee fans. But every single person, Peter Burns, one of my good buddies on XC Network, said it for years. Every single person that said college football's better when Tennessee is relevant, Tennessee's good, you either don't have Twitter or you were just talking out your backside, because it is not. It is a scary, scary sight. It's like I feel like I went into the bathroom and turned the lights off and said Bloody Mary 3 times, and all of a sudden we got like a 10-win Tennessee team appeared. So I think that looking back on it, the parity around the league or around the country was a lot of fun. You had some great storylines, like you said, with the playoff and everything like that. But I will also say, I think with NIL and then combining that with elite coaches going to blue blood programs like LSU and USC, those programs are going to be back. And I think that probably is good for the sport. Another thing too, I'm an SEC guy, but how about the Pac-12, man? Mm-hmm. The Pac-12 finishing the season with 6 ranked teams. Bo Nix, I live bet Bo Nix in Oregon to win a game that they were down, I think with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. If you would have told me that a year ago, I'd be like, Chris, check yourself into either rehab or you got to get some help, brother. You should not be betting on Bo Nix. But yeah, it was some redemption stories are really, really cool. I think there's still a lot of room for it, for next year, even with some of the stories coming back.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the SEC. We also are a little SEC biased here on this show, of course. After watching Georgia win the national championship in the last 2 years, Alabama before that, LSU in 19. For all the folks that say that the SEC is not the best conference, I'm pretty sure that proves them wrong there.
I don't get it. I don't understand. I understand how annoying it could be to be listen, I hate the Yankees. I get it. I hate monopolies and things like that. And the SEC has pretty much had a competitive monopoly over the rest of college sports, and not even just college football, for the last decade and a half, 2 decades. That being said, anybody still arguing that, I just got to know what you're looking at, because I've heard it nonstop from Big Ten fans especially. They'll say, "Oh, the SEC is just top heavy." It's it's just Bama and it's just Georgia. And then I saw a stat today from Fox that threw out here's every team that's made a BCS or a college football playoff national championship game. And lo and behold, the Big Ten had one team for 5 appearances, and it was Ohio State. And I tell you what, if you're going to say other people are top-heavy, well, that's like Dolly Parton looking in the mirror and calling somebody else top-heavy, because that could not be the pot calling the kettle black more.
I love it. I love it. Okay, I got like a hypothetical / a futures bet for you. Who finishes with more national championships in their career? Active coaches, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, or retired, maybe right now, Urban Meyer?
Oh, that'll be Kirby for sure.
Okay.
Urban, I mean, he was trending so well, like at first, and then, he went to that sports bar, had himself a good time. I still can't get over the pizza, the Papa John's golf cart incident from a couple years ago. But the main thing with I thought the question was actually going to be, is it going to be Saban or Kirby? Because
I wasn't going to go that far. Are you going that far?
So to be honest, yeah, like I grew up an Alabama fan. My whole family's fans, and I love Coach Saban. His daughter's one of my best friends. I will say that, like I mentioned this I think a year or two ago, saying that with like where the program is headed under Kirby, he has the chance to get either close or the same amount of titles as Saban, just because he's so young. And now you look what he's done the past 2 years. And you talk about going 29. Here's the thing too: 29-1 the past 2 years.
Yeah.
And you start thinking about second and 26 and how kind of fortunate that was. And he's a Jalen Hurts comeback. From probably making the playoff in 2018. He probably doesn't win it, but I mean, he's in his 7th year as a head coach, and he just won back-to-back national titles. That no one else has done that in the playoff era. But what's scary is that he's 46. And to be a successful coach in this modern era of football, you have to dominate recruiting. You apparently have to never get any sleep, because I don't know how they manage these schedules. But from the hiring standpoint of his assistants, from the recruiting, from the facilities, everything he's done, and he's not going to be a better coach than Saban, I think, all time. I'm not saying that at all. But right now, if you're being honest with yourself, yeah, he's pulled ahead of Saban, and he's kind of distancing himself a little bit just from the last year or so, because, I'll say it. I think Mechie and Williams probably make a big difference in that national championship game 2 years ago. But this year, you just can't argue with what Kirby's done. And I think that when you talk about what he's going to be able to continue to build at his age, dude, he might get to 6 in in the next decade, man.
Wow. Yeah.
Very true. Chris Marler, you can catch him on the College Football Uncensored podcast. Chris, always great to talk with you. Really appreciate you taking a few minutes with us this afternoon. But always glad to catch up with you.
Sounds good, guys. Y'all have a great, off season. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Sounds
Absolutely.
good. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Chris Marler with the College Football Uncensored podcast, as well as Saturday Down South, and always entertaining.
One of our more entertaining guests, and he's got such a great touch as far as understanding the sport and then weaving it into his jokes. As I understand, he's a guy who makes people laugh professionally.
Yes,
and he does a great job at it.
He sure does. Appreciate Chris Marler for joining us. We'll jump to a break. Elliot Galt joins us at the bottom of the hour. More to come in a moment. It is WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Chase and Gerhard here with you. Hope you're having a great Wednesday, halfway through this work week. And as we count down to our final show coming up on Friday, as it'll be our last edition of WKXX Live. We'll let you know later this week what the future is here at WKXX Live, which you'll be hearing. But this is the last week of WKXX Live. Reports have come out. The Pac-12 apparently was putting together a Week 0 matchup between Colorado and Arizona State. Now, Colorado originally on their schedule, the schedule they've put out, had them opening up with TCU, which that should be a good one, to open up the season Week 1. But apparently the Pac-12 thought, hey, we got Kenny Dillingham, new coach at Arizona State. We got Deion Sanders, new coach at Colorado. Let's make a Week 0 Pac-12 matchup. So they were in the works putting that together. Deion thought, hey, while I'm at College Game Day Monday night for the national championships, let me tell Kirk Herbstreit that they're putting this together, and I'm not going to tell him that. Don't say anything, you know, on ESPN during the national championship when everybody's watching. But apparently he didn't say that. Kirk Herbstreit during the broadcast said, "Hey, Deion Sanders said that Colorado and Arizona State are going to play, and guess what? The Pac-12 was not happy that was leaked, and they have nixed the game."
This is really interesting because I like the idea. I like the idea on its surface, and I like the idea in real life. Now, Deion's got a lot to learn about being the head coach at a Power 5 school, and then there's certain I's that got to be dotted and T's that got to be crossed before you can go out and talk about certain things. But even at the end of the day, this still makes a lot of sense to do. So I mean, I don't get why the Pac-12 maybe they want the public to think that they've put it on pause. So we'll see. I mean, I know there's a lot to get done between now and then, but it's to me it seems like a really good idea to have both these schools who are already in your conference anyways, that you have both control over. It's not like you're dealing with two different schools or two different conferences or two different whether it's leagues or coaching staffs. It makes sense. I understand why you're upset, but it makes sense to put this game together anyway.
Yeah, it does. So we'll see. Maybe the Pac-12 will end up putting this together, but right now they're saying nope, not going to play it. Another piece of college football news before we go to break, and I think this is a big one. Spencer Rattler announces he's coming back to South Carolina for another season. So you got Shane Beamer signing a big extension in the offseason. You got Spencer Rattler coming back. You got that receiver. His name's slipping my mind right now. He's coming back. I'm not going to say South Carolina's going to win the SEC East by any means, but watch out for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, you take their last 3 games where knocked off Tennessee, beat them by 1,000,000. Then knocked off Clemson, beat them by 1 to end the regular season. I know they lost to Notre Dame, but they scored 38 points in their bowl game against the Irish, who also had a good end of the season. This is a team that is rolling in going into 2023, and I think this news just catapults them a little bit further. And so it'll be good. We talked about yesterday, in Jacksonville State and South Carolina, that we know that game's going to go on. The Gamecocks versus the Gamecocks. Well, JSU better hope they don't end the season the way they ended this year's season, the way they ended last year's season. I think this is a really good team and a program right now with momentum.
Absolutely. And so, hey, South Carolina fans, you got a lot to be excited about there for South Carolina football next season. Let's jump to a break. More to come in a moment.
Fox Sports 102.9 is
It is WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson, Gerhard Mathengani. Unfortunately, we won't be having our weekly Weiss Lake fishing report today. We're going to move that to tomorrow when Elliot Galt is free and able to do that. So we'll have that for you coming up tomorrow afternoon. So we welcome in your phone calls, 256-413-1029. That is 256-413-1029 if you'd like to call in and be a part of our show this week. If you've missed our announcement the last few days, if you're just tuning in for the week, we do want to let you know that this is our last week of WKXX Live. Friday will be our last show, and we will let you know soon what will be happening here on WKXX 102.9. But do note that this is our last week together here in the afternoons for WKXX Live. So we'd love to get all your phone calls in this week and talk with you, the great listeners who make this job fun, and it's why we do what we do, to bring you great content every afternoon. And of course, we always enjoy talking Jacksonville State Gamecocks. We talked about the schedule yesterday. We talked about the branding of Jack State earlier in the show, but had a chance to listen to some audio from Rich Rod on this schedule, and we talked about it yesterday. This is a much different schedule than anybody is used to. Rich Rod's been in this business a long time. Yeah. And I'm sure he has not had many Tuesday night games in his coaching career.
Especially where he's been. You think about the power programs he's been, where in the Power Five at West Virginia and at Michigan and at Arizona. You don't get a lot of the Tuesday, Wednesday games, but it is a really special thing for JSU. But he's actually, obviously ushering in JSU into a new era. And this was the brain trust at JSU. This is what they wanted. They wanted a guy that's been there before to be able to help the transition, because he knows what it's supposed to look like at its highest level. He knows what the team's supposed to look like at its highest level and where the program is supposed to be at its highest level. And now it's officially here. Now they're officially, well, not officially, obviously, the next time they take a football snap, there'll be an FCS program, but they're still competing in the ASUN and all the winter and spring sports. But this is a really exciting time, obviously, for JSU right now.
Yeah. We have a couple of audio clips from Rich Rod. The first we'll play is just kind of his overall comments on this Conference USA schedule.
Yeah, and he talked about not only the schedule, but being able to get this team in this place, in this university, in a place where it's competing at a really high level, and the excitement overall for 23.
It's exciting. Obviously, our first year in Conference USA, our first year as an FBS Division 1A program. It's unique. It's challenging. I think we have 7 bowl teams on the schedule. And what's really unique is we have 5 midweek games. And for the first time for the whole league, and obviously the first time for us here at Jack State. So going to be a lot of exposure. Should be great for our fans, should be great for our students, and a whole lot of fun for our players as well.
Of the 12 games, the 11 FBS teams, it's either 6 or 7 played in a bowl game last year. So talk about the challenge of that first FBS schedule.
Yeah, not only did the 7 teams play in a bowl game, but I think all but one won their bowl game. So they're all building their programs, and that's our goal. We want to be in a bowl every year. We want to win the Conference USA. We want to be in a bowl every year, and then when the playoff expands, have an opportunity for that as well. And it's certainly a big challenge, but everybody here associated at Jack State understands that. Our players understand it. Our staff does, and we begin the journey right now.
Rich Rod there on the schedule overall for the Conference USA, and as we talked yesterday, it's different than. If you've been keeping up with Jacksonville State football for any amount of time, this is just a different schedule with all these new teams, FBS teams. I mean, it's going to take some getting used to, I think.
There's a lot of people out there that probably just remember like it was yesterday, the days of Bill Burgess and the days of Jack Crow, and being not only in Division II and then in the FCS with going in the Southland Conference at the beginning, playing the Mises States of the world, and then obviously playing UNAs and Troy's. this is a complete overhaul of all of that. This is a complete changeover of all of that. And I think there's a lot of people who are really excited for JSU, and some people who remember the fond days of both Division II and FCS. Spent, a long time in Division II, 30 years in the FCS, and now you're going to the FBS, but in a really unique situation. But with the way college football has changed and with the landscape of the change, there is no doubt that FBS football is where you want to be. That's the level you want to be in. Not saying that FCS is any bad or anything like that. It's just you want to be in the FCS.
Yeah, that's very true. And we've learned that if you're not in the Dakotas, you're probably not going to make it to the FCS National Championship.
Exactly. And it's really showed you that. And also, as Greg Seitz has told us, we've had a chance to interview him on a couple of occasions. You have as well. This actually makes those guaranteed games, those money games, so to speak. A lot of the teams that are in the group of five, they need the games against the Power Five in order to, jamming out here. Those teams need those guaranteed games in order to be able to fund other sports. And it's actually easier for JSU to schedule those games. South Carolina is the game next year. It's easier for JSU to schedule those games as an FBS opponent, as an FBS school in Conference USA.
Yeah. Rich Rod also spoke on just the uniqueness of this year's schedule and what the Conference USA is doing, and midweek games in the month of October.
I think midweek games, when they first started out, I might be wrong on this, but the first conference that I remember doing this was the MAC, because you had Tuesday MACtion day. And when they started it, it was to gain some exposure, have some national TV games, because you have the Monday Night Football game in the NFL, and then a little bit of dead space, maybe a Thursday night. NFL's Thursday night games are usually not that great anyways. And then nothing until Saturday. So you started to see these midweek games come in. Well, now Conference USA is really, really utilizing that midweek game, especially in the month of October. And Coach Rich Rodriguez talked about, you mentioned it, the uniqueness of it and being able to play that entire month. Basically, a large part of that, these standalone national games.
We're going to talk about a 4-hour commercial for our school, and we have a lot to sell, a lot of positive things. There's so many great things happening here, and I think the country will get to see it. Obviously, they'll get to watch our program, but also it'll get to show our student body, and I think they'll have a great time with it. Maybe if they have a test the next day, the professors will let up a little easier and move the test back, or maybe if we win, maybe they'll even cancel classes. Who knows? But not seriously, I think our students will love it. I think it gives us something positive to do at night. I think the atmosphere will be really electric.
And he brings up a good point as far as student involvement. Because you think about Jacksonville State, it's known as a school where a lot of students go home on the weekends.
Yeah.
Maybe students, I was a commuter. I commuted up there, living in Anniston. So you weren't always there in Jacksonville.
Right.
But if you're on a weekday where you got class till 4 o'clock or whatever, then you can just move over to the football stadium. I think it's going to get a lot of students there. Not that a lot of students aren't going anyway on Saturdays, because they do, but you'll have more students already on campus that may not be previously or may not be that day anyway. You're going to have them right there on campus.
Yeah, no doubt. It's been a long time since I was in school there, but I graduated from JSU, and it's known as the suitcase college. As you mentioned it, people on Fridays usually pack up and head home. You got a lot of people from the Georgia area, got a lot of people from the Birmingham and Huntsville areas. And they ended up going back home, and a lot of times there wasn't as much stuff to do on the weekends. Now I know homecoming and JSU's band day, and there's some football Saturdays that you're able to come back. But you have naturally a lot of people on campus Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I think this will be a really unique situation. I remember a playoff game happening on a Thursday, or a great midday or midweek game happening on a Thursday against Furman. That game was packed out. There are certain pockets of time here where you can utilize these dates. And what I think that ends up doing also is that if you get great momentum for those midweek games in football, it bleeds over into basketball and into baseball and softball. So it can really help all athletics and all sports, because as you mentioned yesterday, there's not a lot of natural rivalries in this conference until Kennesaw State comes in. So if you do have an event for people to come by, and if you can maybe pair that with maybe like a musical event, or maybe pair that with some kind of event where there's a lot going on that day on campus, the student involvement, I think, is big. And then that also bleed into, I think, be a lot of adults as well, and a lot of close by alumni might be able to take a Tuesday or a Wednesday take that off, bring their kids down, and enjoy it. And as Coach Rich Rodriguez says, maybe the students and the professors work together and say, hey, if we win, let's maybe either cancel class or maybe do it online today or whatever the case is. I think it's great for involvement, and it can add a different wrinkle that maybe JSU hasn't had in the past playing on the weekends. Yeah, for sure. And let's just be honest. There's a lot of folks in this area who, like we've talked about, are Alabama, Auburn, season ticket holders, or what their kids may go there, they go down. So this will give them an opportunity. Maybe JSU alumni, JSU fans who go to other games on Saturdays, to have a chance to see the game count. Yeah, no doubt. And this is not an isolated situation. I mean, UAB goes through this, and Sanford goes through this, and Troy goes through this, and North Alabama goes through this, and South Alabama does, and it's not isolated to Alabama. It's the same thing in the state of Georgia. You can make it work with your FBS schools, your FCS schools, and your schools that compete out of the Power Five. And I think this is a good wrinkle for it. The head of the Conference USA had to act quickly because there's a lot of teams that left, a lot of schools that left, and you needed to add quality back to your conference. That was one. I think they got that checked off. Adding Jacksonville State, adding Sam Houston, and Liberty. I think all three great moves. And then I think the weekday games is another great move because now you don't have Liberty competing with Virginia. Now you don't have Sam Houston competing with your Texases. You have them on the standalone games, and I think that it does create better exposure for a lot of these other teams that are in this conference, and for a conference trying to rebrand itself as well, with a lot of teams now moving out, UAB out, and a lot of other teams moving out. The Conference USA is trying to reintroduce itself to the college football landscape as well. Yeah, for sure. So it's good to hear Coach Rich Rod comment there on the schedule for 2023. We'll jump to a break here, come back, wrap up the Wednesday show, some NFL news and notes. We'll do that next.
Talking to your kids.
WKXX Live on Fox Sports 102.9. Chase and Gerhard rolling through this Wednesday afternoon with you as we'd love to take your phone call, 256-413-1029. As we get ready to wrap up this Wednesday, appreciate our guest, Brad Law from the Auburn Sports Network, Chris Marler, the College Football Uncensored podcast, and coming up tomorrow, Elliot Galt will join us for our weekly Weiss Lake Fishing Report. So looking forward to that. Let's go to the phone lines as Coach Short joining us. Coach, how are you? You got us, Coach?
Hello?
Hey, Coach, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Huh. I don't know what that was. Let's,
Yeah, we'll see if we can get him back.
Yeah, call back, Coach. All right, now let's try it. Hey, Coach, can you hear us?
I can hear you now. How y'all doing, guys?
Doing
Perfect.
well. How are
Doing
you?
great.
I'm doing fine. Hey, Gerhard, I think maybe I haven't talked to you since Monday night, but we could have probably written a script on how they called it.
Yeah, we could have. You call that game plan to a T. I mean, with the tight ends, Washington and Bowers, especially Bowers, carving that defense up, and McConkey, playing a great game as well. Yeah, that was to the script. It was to the script as far as game plan goes, not to the script as far as what I thought the score would be.
The national media talked me into giving them 20 points. I tell you what, and I did. I think they just put that kind of egg, but they laid over.
I thought the defense, and I falsely assumed that the defense was a little bit susceptible after C.J. Stroud carved him up, and then I should have remembered this is Kirby Smart we're talking about. He would have made the adjustments and not let Max Duggan do the same thing.
Well, you do remember last year Alabama carved them up in the SEC championship, and
Yep.
they said, "All right, here comes the pressure." I just thought they'd go a little softer to start the game, but no. That just proved to me after the first two drives, the way they were playing defense, he knew they were going to win.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he knows, but he knew they had superior talent, and that we're just going to go ahead and put the pressure on them because they did not have – they had one great receiver, but he had one catch, but the other ones didn't. But anyway, I wanted to call because everybody knows I'm a sports talk show freak. I mean, I listen to 24/7, and I'm going to tell you, y'all's show is right up there with what they call so-called some of the best in the country.
I really appreciate that.
But in the country, because you have great content, you have great speakers, and you know what you're talking about. There's somebody like Paul Feinbaum gets on there. That's not a sports talk show. That's a bunch of potheads and drunks get on there and talk. He has good speakers. He does do that, but not when they get to college. So, anyway, I just want to tell y'all, I don't know what's in store for your future, but I do know the good Lord's going to take care of good people, and y'all are good people. Yeah.
I really appreciate that, Coach. That means a lot.
Yeah, I truly appreciate it. It means a lot coming from you.
And if anything, look, I know my sports talking. Y'all got it. Now, if anybody from JSU's listening, I'm a Gamecock fan, but my last couple of years of coaching, and even now, if they're going to move up like they're moving up with the big boys now, they got to start doing spring training when they do it and not do it at 7 and 8 o'clock in the mornings because high school coaches can't get there without taking a day off. And that's tough on them to be able to get off and miss a day of school to go over and watch them practice. And guess what else don't get to come? High school players.
Yeah,
so they've got to get back to doing it in the afternoon some. I understand the about classrooms and classes and all that stuff, but it and the big boy level, they make it happen.
Yeah.
So if you're going to play on the big boy level, then you're going to have to start. The school's going to have to start doing big level type things and allowing that to happen. Having clinics and getting more coaches on there. And if you remember, there used to be, I won't say names, but there used to be a spring football that they had. High school football game. You've called them. I've been there.
Yeah.
They've had them, and we've talked about it before, about making the school have an opportunity to showcase themselves.
Right.
They've never done that when they had that. So somebody that with a great mind ought to be able to get together and pull enough high-quality teams that's got a lot of players on it to come there on a 2 or 3 night deal. And the school,
really take over and showcase their school, their athletic department. Because y'all were just talking about having things when they do these ball games. Well, in the spring, you can have concerts, you can have baseball going on, soccer, every sport, softball. There's so much that can be sold with a spring game and the athletic really getting to be a part of it and getting all the high schools in there and really showcase it. Because they tried a little bit and said, "Oh yeah, we'll show you around," but nobody would show up to show you around. So somebody's missing the boat on that, and all you guys in JSU out there in this world is listening, please open up spring training where the coaches can come watch and it not be at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I can because I'm retired. But your other guys can't.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a wrinkle that I think that you had, Coach, that not a lot of people get insight to, and something that I don't necessarily even think about, but it makes a lot of sense. If you want to recruit at that level, you have to be able to augment your schedule, because Alabama, they'll give us their schedule. Auburn, Alabama will give us their schedule all the time right before spring practice starts. They all have afternoon dates because you can accommodate for high school coaches and the prospects that are coming in. That's a really good point, and I'll be interested to see just how much they navigate and they shift around their spring scheduling for that.
Well, I have to. That's what. There's our music again.
Yeah,
we're not kicking you off. I promise.
It's that computer's got a mind of its own.
It happens to me all the time in the sports talk show I do in the mornings. It happens all the time. But, look, they're going to have to do that. If they want to be successful, and that's not just football, but football is one that brings the money in. If they want to be ultra successful at this level, they're going to have to be creative and getting people on campus and getting their eyes in the stadium. Because people still look at, like you mentioned a while ago, and they were great days, Bill Burgess days, Jack Crow days, but it's a different time.
Yeah.
And kids want to get there. They want to see their new facilities. They want to see the weight rooms and all that stuff. You got to show it off and make it look good. So if they're not willing to do that, they're going to just be mediocre, and that's why you make a move if you want to be mediocre.
Yeah,
very true.
So,
great stuff.
Coach, appreciate the call today.
All right, guys. Y'all have a great day. See you.
Thanks, Coach.
That is all the time we have for you today. We will be back with you tomorrow as we continue on our final week of WKXX Live. We'll be back with you from 2 to 4 coming up on your Thursday. Great show as always planned for you. We will talk to you then.